Hello, everybody. We're here with Bishop Ralph Donnie Graves, talking about his history, accomplishments, the past, present, and talking about his near future. Bishop Graves, glad to have you here.
I'm honored to be here with you. It's a wonderful thing that you all are doing. I appreciate being included.
Of course, we had to include you. Um, Doing the things that you have done, especially in our area, Rockingham County. Rockingham County is an area that we consider right now it's kind of dry. People are not getting back together like they used to. People done cut out choir anniversaries, and they went from five nights of revivals to three, and it might be taxing to people's bodies, but people are saying the same thing. Why don't we get together? So we're doing this documentary to kind of wake up, and what we want to know, we want to start from the past with you, your beginnings.
Okay.
What was the age you started playing and being interested in music, and the upbringing, the influences? That's what we want to start with.
Well, of course, I was born and raised in Eden, North Carolina. 513 Henry Street in Eden, North Carolina, right across the street from Mount Sinai Baptist Church. I was born to the union of my mother, the late Evangelist Annie Pearl Graves Harrison, and Ralph Julius Graves, my father. Of course, I lived in the home with my grandparents and my mother, Dr. Letty Cohen and Deacon William Cohen, and all the Cohen family. And as far back as I can remember, was about 4 years old, I began playing the little small piano we had in our house, a little short Pininfarina piano back in the day, and I began playing that little black piano with 2 fingers. And that 2 fingers went to 3 fingers. My grandmother played ragtime gospel. As a matter of fact, after the Lord saved her, she was a member before of Morning Star Baptist Church in Spray, North Carolina, back when it was Spray, Leesville, Draper, and Spray. And sitting in a rocking chair at my great-grandmother Pearlie's house, she was praying for God to give her the next level of whatever it was. God, if it's whatever it is, it's something else I want it. And she came to herself in the floor, holding my oldest uncle, speaking in tongues, and she didn't know what was going on with her. So she left there and came back to Mount Sinai Baptist Church because my grandfather was a member there. And in the middle of service, she jumped up and started dancing and praising the Lord. And they called a meeting at the church with my grandfather and told him that she could not do that. They couldn't have that in the church. And she cried and said, I'm not trying to do this. I don't know what's wrong with me. And my Uncle Alan Cohen was a member of Robinson Memorial up the top of Henry Street, right across where Monument of Faith is now. And my grandfather took her there, and the pastor, Ella R.D. Richardson, when she walked in the door, he said, "The Lord sent you." And she became the main pianist for that church. So she played ragtime gospel back in that day. So she showed me my first couple of chords, and then I started picking up from the influence of, first of all, my Aunt Doris Cohen Harbor, Mother Harbor, and then my Aunt Carol Robertson, she started showing me, and then lastly, my Uncle Bishop Harry Cohen. So I'm a conglomeration of all the generations. My style of music has a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. And so I started playing it forward. By the time I was 10, I started traveling, playing for our bishops. You're very young, but the pastor of Jerusalem, before Pastor Jackson and before Bishop Elijah Williams, was Bishop A.W. Lawson. And Bishop Lawson called my grandmother and my mother and asked could I play for him in Atlanta, Georgia at 10 years old. So he took me to revival, and I played for him at 10 for the revival and walked the neighborhood and got a choir together of young people at 10. And from there, I continued to play for different churches like Jones Chapel Baptist church. They were paying me $25 a Sunday, and a little boy, 10 years old, 11 years old, getting $25 a Sunday. That was a lot of money back in the day. I played for Morning Star. By the age of 12, I was playing the organ. And I became Morning Star organist. They had a little ballroom over at Blue Creek. And I started playing there. In the midst of that, my mother always wanted me to have formal music. So she took me to Dr. A.W. Thompson and started me with music. And the very first time I went there, I was 5 years old. And Mr. Thompson would play the music, the assignment, 1 week before. And I'd come back the next week and I would play it just like I had been knowing it. And he found out later I couldn't read music, because what was going on was when he would play it, I would instantly memorize it. And I'd go back and play it the next week. And so he had to get to the place he wouldn't play it, so I would learn how to read music. And from Mr. Thompson, I went to middle school. Back then we called it junior high school. And I was introduced to Mr. Dwayne Best. He and I are still very, very close. He and his wife now live in Cary, in a retired senior citizens complex. But Mr. Best introduced me to Virgil Fox and other classical organists. We were at Moorhead High School, and Virgil Fox was doing what they call the Lyceum series. And he brought that huge Rogers organ, put it on Moorhead Stadium, Moorhead High School auditorium, and played that organ, and I fell in love with pipe organ music that day and determined that I was going to go to school to learn to play the pipe organ. And that inspired me to go to Winston-Salem State. Back to gospel music and the African American community, I was greatly influenced and always mesmerized by old people. Old people have always blessed my life. I think part of the divide that our young people are missing is the heritage of the old. And I grew up in the time when you could visit the neighborhood. You left home in the morning and you came back by the time street light came on. You weren't worried about it being abducted or anything. So I'd roam all over Henry Street, Monroe Street, and sit down and talk to people like Ms. Adams that lived across the street. Go down the street to Ms. Lockett, Lottie Price, and then go to my great-grandfather, Lynn Cohen. And they would tell me their stories about the history of Eden and how the church got there, and Mount Sinai building being such a monumental building in that it was built during the Depression. And God allowed them to build that big church in the period of Depression. And I was able to glean from them. Well, in light of that, there were some old musicians that still lived, that still were living, and I would be mesmerized by their playing. One of those was an old lady that played at Robinson Memorial years ago named Kathleen Edmondson. Kathleen Edmondson played after my grandmother got there. She took my grandmother's place at Robinson Memorial and played wonderfully. She moved to Mount Airy, North Carolina, and later died. But she influenced my Aunt Doris. So my Aunt Doris' music style was influenced by Kathleen Edmondson. That was a musician up at Robinson Memorial. And then, of course, I was inspired because every Sunday morning we could hear the music from across the street at Mount Sinai. And Mount Sinai was a very dignified, starchy church. Mrs. Ruth Price, who just passed a few years ago in her 90s, she was the pianist, and they finally bought the first Hammond organ, a Hammond organ with long pedals. We were excited about it, that organ. Her son, Arthur Fisher, played with his mother. Both of them are deceased now. But we could hear that organ across the street. I was mesmerized by that and the chants. So what I've taken in my church, my churches that I pastor and that I'm presiding over, is our worship service engages all the experiences that I've ever had. We have We have hymns. We sing a hymn every Sunday.
Yes.
We have chants after the prayer. We have choral responses. Ms. Ruth Price is one of those influences. And from that, I started a youth choir in middle school. I was 15 years old. I started the Youth Crusade Choir. It was interracial and interdenominational. And it pulled all of us together right in the cusp of civil rights being involved in Eden, when there was still a lot of Jim Crowism. I had Caucasians in the choir, some playing drums, some playing guitars, some singing in the choir. And our first concert was held at Spray United Methodist Church. Now that was monumental because Spray was the most prejudiced area of the three cities, the Tri-Cities. And Reverend Fagan, who was the pastor of Spray, invited us to come, and we did our first 45 recording at Spray United Methodist Church, and the audience was multicultural. We had about 157 young people over the Eden, Axton, Reedsville area. They all came, and we became a choir. And by that time, I had taken the music department of Gospel Light and St. Mariah, and formulated them, influenced by the late Dr. Mattie Moss Clark, who took me on at the age of 10 and became my mentor. And I was inspired by her writing, and I started writing songs. So one of my first songs that I wrote or rearranged on a recording was "I Want to Die Easy When I Die." It was an old spiritual. And then the next one I wrote at 15 years old, which we still sing, is "Talk to God."
Yes.
I wrote that song at 15 years old and recorded it with Gospel Light Choir. And on from there, I was inspired. After that, my mother wanted to make sure that I kept going to school. And so I was pushed to go to Winston-Salem State. I went to Winston-Salem State because my Uncle Harry, Bishop Cohen, he had gone to Winston-Salem State earlier. And of course, he was older than I, but he went to school, came out, went to the Army 4 years. And by the time he came back, I was ready to go to school. So he and I became roommates in college together. And I went to Winston-Salem State, studied. I was an organ major and a piano and sacred music minor. And so from that, that's how my music career started. And it all started right in the Rockingham County area.
Yes. Now, Bishop Graves, now, we got that. Now, we have to talk about your transition. You're still a musician, but you became a minister, elder, and now you're bishop and apostle. And, you know, let's talk about DT, Deliverance Temple.
Okay.
You know, how it was dropped in your spirit to start a organization such as this.
Okay. The Lord called me to preach when I was officially 17 years old. I preached my initial message in November 1972 at St. Mariah. And after coming out of college, I went to Virginia to work on my master's in divinity at Virginia Union. But there, the late Bishop Annie Chamberlain died, and I was so devastated at her death. They called me to teach music in Fayetteville. Just out of the clear blue sky. She passed, and they called me to come in the middle of the semester. As a matter of fact, I started teaching in Fayetteville April 1978. And when I got to Fayetteville to teach music, the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me and said, "I want you to start a church here." And I said, "All right, Lord, if you want me to start a church, how do I do it? Where do I go?" And the Lord said to me, "Pick up the phone book, open it, and call the first realtor that you see." And I opened it, and it opened to George Brees Realty Company. I called him and I said, Mr. Breeze, I need to see about renting a building, a small storefront, start a church. And he said to me, he said, I'm a Pentecostal and the Lord said that you don't need a storefront. But there's an old abandoned church down on Cashwell Street. Go down and see how you like it. I was mesmerized at the fact that this man I didn't know anything about says to me, I'm a Pentecostal. I'm dialing the first number of the realty company and he says, you need a church, not a storefront. And so I went down to the church on Cashwell Street and it was an old AME church, St. Luke AME. They had built a new church on Hillsborough Street. And the prostitutes were using the church to have their play. The balcony had a balcony all the way around the church, and they would go up in the balcony and do whatever. And we found all kind of paraphernalia when we went in there. There was a hole in the back door. You could stick your hand in, open the door, and go in, go upstairs. No furniture was there, but rats and roaches and birds were flying around in the church because they had holes in the wall. And I walked in and looked, and I said, "Oh, this is beautiful." And of course, my mother. And at that time, my wife Brenda, they looked at me like I was crazy because the building kind of looked run down. But I could just see what God would do with it. And so I started the church, and they said I was a little hard preacher back then. They called me the truth preacher. And so I named the church, strange enough, it was not Deliverance Temple, it was Temple of Truth. United Holy Church. Temple of Truth, United Holy Church. And I went to Goldsboro to register the church. And while I was there, a couple of the elders gave me such a fit. And my presiding bishop at the time, Bishop J.A. Forbes Sr., came down, had Emory pastor, he's Bishop Emory James, that just made him bishop in May this year, brought him down to Fayetteville, and Bishop Forbes said, they're giving you a hard time. He says, I'm old. If I were younger, I would start over again as well. He said, but while you have a chance, you're young. He said, build this ministry. And so that was in September 78. I left the convocation. Bishop Forbes came to see me the week after. And I filed the next week for the charter, and we named it Deliverance Temple of Truth Holy Church. That's how that name, it started as Temple of Truth, then we added on Deliverance because I'd been so influenced by the deliverance ministry of the late Apostle Arturo Skinner. Sign wonders and miracles in that. And got the first charter, and started that first church in that building on Cashwell Street. And I'm telling you, God moved by his power in that place. There were days I laid in the church 3 and 4 days fasting and praying, and we watched people healed. We had blind eyes open. We had babies that were deformed healed. We watched a woman with a knot in her breast. The Lord healed her, and she never had to have the breast removed. On and on and on. We saw all kinds of miracles. Not only that, but people came off the streets. Transvestites and drag queens gave their heart to the Lord and became ministers and preachers. And that was the very first church. Second church was in Martinsville, Virginia at the time. Pastor Alvin Eckers had a church. He started in Martinsville. That became church number 2. And then Bishop Charles Lyles, 13 of them had joined the church in Fayetteville, and they lived in New Jersey. And they were traveling back and forth from Atlantic City, New Jersey to Fayetteville by car, by bus, by train, at least 3 times a month. And I said, with 13 of them, I said, it's too far for me to come. And I ordained Charles Lyles as a deacon, and then gave him his first minister's license. And we started his church in Pleasantville, New Jersey. Victory, that became the third church. And then Mother Helen Burks up in Camden, New Jersey, became the 4th church. When they got ready to buy a church in Pleasantville, the Methodist Church was going to sell them the church but they wanted to know who the bishop was. And they told them, we didn't have a bishop because I wasn't a bishop. I was just John Weld. And at that point, after 4 churches, the pastor said, please let us consecrate you bishop. And so they called upon Bishop Sylvester Webb, Bishop Caldwell, and Bishop Majette to come and consecrate me Bishop March 2nd, 1980. And from that, other churches sprung up throughout the region. And now, around the wall, all the banners that you see are the churches in our organization. Those are our churches. The banners represent each church.
Mr. Graves, is to hear all this. This could be a book and a movie.
Oh, thank you.
And like I said, with you doing all that, give us hope that we can still reach, for those things, because those are great things. You've been around great people. You caused a lot of ruckus on everywhere, especially Philadelphia. I'm gonna tell you the reason why. We went to 1998. We went to the Gospel Music Workshop of America, and it was in Philadelphia. So we went with your cousin's choir, Spirit, Laney Robinson, Reverend Laney Robinson. Yeah. So we was floating around and being with everybody, and we were letting some people know that we was from North Carolina. First thing they said, do you all know Bishop Donnie Graves? So me and the other cousin, Monty, said, Bishop Graves got Philadelphia locked down. But it's great. Everywhere we've been, they found out we're from North Carolina, your names comes up. And I know it's been trying times. And, we know that, you're faced with different adversities. But, I always look at you like the Hulk. Just, whatever goes on, you just take it and fight. And I appreciate that. Now, I want to ask you this. This will probably be, we can wrap it up. What is the future for Bishop Donnie Graves? Are we going to get any more records? Are we going to have a Bishop Donnie Graves music convention? Are we going to, I know you have your convocations in August still, right?
Yes.
What was that, any books?
Yes, I have a book, and I'm going to need you all to still be my friend when the book is published. It's already finished.
All right.
It has been edited, and it's ready to be published. Actually, there are 3 books that's getting ready to come out. One of them I've been working on for 25 years. It is Items on the Lord's Body. It talks about how we ban people from the communion table. When that was not what Jesus wanted in the first place. We frighten people that if you eat and drink of the body of the Lord, you eat damnation. And we're not talking about the cracker or the juice. He was talking about rejecting each other. And I deal with that in that book. Actually, it's going to be a scholarly book, and I'll happen to go back now and have conversation with a couple of PhD professors at Duke, because we're interacting to make the book scholarly so it can be used as a textbook in seminary. The other book that I'm doing is talking about the broken pulpit, the subject of it. Pastors that preach to you faith, and they themselves are broken and torn. They preaching healing while their bodies are falling apart. They preach you about family structure, and their families have been dissolved. The broken pulpit. The 3rd book that I'm writing is a controversial book, but it has evolved out of pastoral counseling for years, and it's called The Third Variable. Steve Harvey has a book called Act Like a Woman, Think Like a Lady, Think Like a Man, something like that. They use the components A and B. A and B is a male and a female. Mm-hmm. A male and female equals marriage and children. Mm-hmm. What happens to the equation when there's A and B plus a 3rd variable that becomes something else? And what that 3rd variable is, as I've counseled couples, I'm finding that that's a prevailing element because you have a man that's in love with a woman and she's bisexual. You have a woman that's in love with a man and he's bisexual. What do you do with that element? Of course, the church can say, cast the devil out, shut the door. But the second chapter of that book is talked about. It's called The Unprejudiced Heart. The heart is, your heart decides. You may find a woman that you fall in love with, she may be ugly as sin. And everybody talks about how ugly she is. But if you're in love with her, you cannot not love who you love. Right. So it's talking about what to do. How do you deal with that area? Because it's becoming a prevailing challenge for a lot of couples. And I deal with that element in the book, and I talk about it. And I have a lot of couples that I've used different teaching tactics that's become very viable to them. They're able to get through it and still have good families and raise kids and that kind of piece. So that book is coming out. Now, as far as recording, Twinkie Clark and I talked just this past week. We decided we wanted to do another recording with Mass Choir. And we wanted to do something. A lot of choirs are not doing anthems anymore. We did those big anthems like When Morning Gills the Skies and A Mighty Fortress, those big old anthems, and we redo those hymns. And we want to do some of that. Rich Smallwood, of course, we were influenced by the classical side. We brought that into the gospel side and it gave us another sound. So we're thinking about doing that. I've talked to Dr. David Allen. I've talked to Bishop Charles Lyles and several others about doing a music workshop convention. Meaning years ago, back in 1974, we had our first music workshop convention of the United Holy Church. And I don't mean having choir rehearsal, I mean where we have classes where we're teaching, directing, composing, choir decorum, worship, keyboard, drums, guitar, and then really training voices. Because I'm finding that a lot of musicians today, they teach songs, but they don't train the voices.
That's right. And
when you don't train the voices, you get the song, but you lose the quality of what the choir could sound like. So we're trying to do that. The latter part of 15, early part of 16, a music convention. Trying to do it in the central North Carolina area, which will be here in Raleigh.
Yes. That's it for the history, past, present, and future of Bishop Ralph Donnie Graves. Mr. Graves, we thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And you know we love you. That's why we had to come and see you.
Thank you. I'm honored.